In this video, I'm going to tell you about whether or not you should give a game a second chance. The idea for this video came from my friend Matt, who I work with at Game4. You can check out his gaming-related and 3D printer blog in the link down below. Anyway, we were talking and this kind of concept came up about giving certain games a second chance. We are, as tabletop wargamers, absolutely blessed with the amount of choices that we have available to us in tabletop wargaming. There are hundreds of different games. There's obviously the big names, but there's tons and tons of little indie ones and self-produced by people and maybe done by medium-sized groups and done by bigger groups, and then of course the big ones. There's so many different types of games that we as miniatures players can choose from that sometimes you frankly just don't want to have to deal with a certain game if you kind of don't like it. This happened to me with a little game. You guys may have heard of it. It's called Warhammer 40,000. The year was, well, I frankly don't remember the year, but it was 7th edition. And after 7th edition came out for Warhammer 40,000, I played about maybe 2 times. And then I stopped playing. And this is a game that I've been playing for quite some time. It had been a world that I've been interested in for even longer. And as the editions kind of marched on, I just got less and less interested in the game due to the way the rules worked and the complications and all that kind of stuff. And 7th edition came out, and I bought the book, and I thumbed through it, and I, played some practice games with some friends, and then I kind of stopped. And I started looking at other game systems, and, that's just kind of the way it worked. I thought, okay, well, the era of Warhammer 40,000 is, it's over. Now, fast forward to, now, and obviously we know that that's actually not the case. 8th edition came out, fixed a ton of things, brought tons and tons of people back into the game, and even kind of including me. I will be honest, I have not particularly been playing a lot of 8th edition. What I've been playing instead has been Kill Team, which is related to 8th edition to some degree. Obviously it uses the same models and all that kind of jazz. But I know that 8th edition has done very well for them, because I was not the only person who got to 7th edition and said, you know what, I don't think I'm going to do this anymore. There were a lot of people who'd kind of given up the ghost on 40K. And then after the release of 8th edition, majority of those folks have come back, and many, many others, either who, lapsed a long time ago or who have always been interested in getting in, and they've popped up. Now, I gave 8th edition a chance, mainly because of all of the talk that I heard from friends and from people online that I know and things like that saying, wow, this is really good. So I bought the book and I went through and checked it out. And it is really good. And so I'm really glad that was able to happen. And that's something that sometimes does happen. Sometimes things do get better. Sometimes a property's going the wrong direction and they get it back on track. And then in those situations, if you're still interested in that property, absolutely you should give the game a second chance, because it will hopefully bring you back to the modeling that you enjoyed, the type of game, the style of game that you enjoyed, and really give you some more enjoyment in your hobby. But sometimes it's not about a change in the game. Sometimes it's something a little bit more amorphous, let's say. So recently I've been talking a little bit more about Star Wars Legion. Now that game's been out for about a year, a little bit over, I think. And when it first came out, I thought to myself, well, I'm a Star Wars fan, been a Star Wars fan since the first Star Wars movie, so this should be right up my alley. I like Star Wars, I like miniatures, But as I started going through and looking at the models at the time, I just wasn't wowed like I am quite frequently with some other companies like Malifaux miniatures from Weird Games, like stuff from Games Workshop for either Age of Sigmar or 40K. A lot of other companies were really at that time amazingly picking up their game. And when I saw the first models in the core set for Star Wars Legion, I wasn't blown away, and that was something that really just sort of got into my brain and just sort of needled at me and said, well, if that's the case, then what's the point? And And then I didn't really get into the game. I didn't pick it up, and I just sort of let it go on its way. But a reason to take a second look at a game that you may have decided that you're not interested in, there's a lot of them. One reason is if the other people in your area start to play. If you really hate a game, well, that's a different story. But if you're like, well, I'm not sure, and you pass on it, and then a lot of people in your area start playing it, you might want to think about it again, because there is a benefit to having opponents and people to play against. There's definitely something to be said for having people at the local shop that show up kind of frequently, or that you can message in an app or something like that. So you can say, hey, let's get together and play on Thursday night, or, well, I can't, how about Saturday, whatever. When you are in a situation where the game that you love is almost impossible to find anywhere, an opponent that is, then that's way worse. So when you find a game that you're like, I'm not sure, but a lot of people play it around here, I would definitely give it a second look. Now, for me, that's part of the reason that I'm looking at Star Wars, but another part of the reason that I'm looking at Star Wars Legion again and painting a bunch of models is because even though I do find some of the models to not be, spectacular, they are easy to put together, for one thing. They go together really easily. They have very little in the way of mold lines. I put this squad here of stormtroopers together last night. There's 7 of them. I did it in maybe 45 minutes. It's amazing kind of how quickly they can go together. And so I really dug that. And that's a definite benefit to kind of pull me back into that game, because I can build a force. Actually, in this situation, I'm going to have to build 2 forces because I want both some of the Empire stuff and some of the Rebel stuff. But it's going to allow me to get that done a lot quicker. Plus, at least for me, if the models aren't spectacular, I feel a little bit better about speed painting. You know what I mean? When I first looked at them, I'm like, well, wouldn't want to spend so much time on these models because I'm just not super sure about them and I don't like them. But some of the new ones they've come out with have been really spectacular, so that's been cool. Like the new stuff, like Bosk and Krennic, and a lot of different models that have just recently dropped have been great sculpts, and I think that they're moving towards that even more with this new Clone Wars set that's going to be coming out sometime in the next couple of months. And so I looked at it and I thought, there's some people that are starting to play it in my local area. I've been watching some battle reports about it, and I do enjoy the game style. I had actually even done a demo of it back when it first came out at my local shop, just because I didn't want to just completely discount it. And I did like the gameplay, but there were other things that were kind of turning me off. So having the idea that, yes, the gameplay is not bad, and I enjoy that too, I can kind of give in to the models a little bit because they do go together so quickly, and because I can then, feel good speed painting them pretty quickly. All these things caused me to give a second look and give a second chance to Star Wars Legion. So this isn't going to work for everybody. Sometimes when you look at a game and you look at it and you just go, nope, totally get that. You either hate the subject matter or you hate the whatever it is. Maybe you're just not into historicals and you see a historical game that some of your friends start playing and you're like, I'm not going to get into that. It totally makes sense. I get it. Or it's a fantasy game and you don't like fantasy. Whatever that goes. But if you see a game that you're like, this should tick more boxes for me, but there's just something about it that's just not, sometimes giving it some time and looking at it again is important, because you may find that at first blush, first impressions were not necessarily as right as you might have thought. So sometimes if you're thinking about I'm really tired of playing this game, or I want to spread out a little bit, instead of going out and trying to find something completely new, although that's not a bad idea either. But first, I would tell you honestly to start by going back and looking at some other games that you've passed on in the past and checking around in your area to see who's playing, who's not. Give that an idea. Take a look at the models again. Say, is that what turned me away? Like, if it was a situation of I loved the models but I hate the game, that's going to be a little bit more difficult. Like, if the rules just rub you the wrong way, then until they come up with a new rule set, like when they go from 7th to 8th and 40K or something like that, then you may want to just kind of hang back. But if they do update the rules, then that might be something to look at. Malifaux is just going now into 3rd edition, and I used to play a bit in 2nd edition, but there were parts of it that just wasn't necessarily my thing. Plus, also, almost nobody plays around here. But now, I do have some friends that are starting to play Malifaux relatively near where I live, and the 3rd edition's coming out, so I might be taking a look at that again as well, because I do love the models. That's not a problem in this situation. So taking a look at the models, the rules, the setting, and how many people in your local area can actually be called upon to play at any given time. All of these things are what you should take into consideration when you decide to take a second look at a game that you've passed on in the past. And it's important, I think, to do that. Base it off of those things. It shouldn't take you super long to sit down and kind of check all those 4 different boxes and figure things out. And if you do, make a decision, and maybe you're going to find yourself playing something that you didn't think you were going to play before.